With more than 57 hours under my belt exploring Night City, this game, Cyberpunk 2077, has been an absolute photographer's dream. Okay, so this game is not exactly without controversy, but I'm not going to talk about the issues surrounding the gameplay and development. I'm focusing purely on the photography mode in the game and how amazing it is potentially for photographers. It famously runs poorly on old consoles or lackluster PCs, but if you have the hardware to pull it off, if you are an enthusiast photographer and you are an occasional gamer, I highly encourage you to check out this game and enjoy what the photography mode has to offer. You have this gorgeous retro sci-fi night city to explore and play around with your virtual camera, filled with stunning design cars, varying light sources, reflections, and day versus night environments. You can put the camera just about anywhere, and if you don't like the lighting, you can just simply wait a few hours for the natural light to change. It's an amazing experience doing things you always wish you could do in real life. It's actually a great excuse to experiment and flex those creative muscles you use in photography. Not the technical stuff about gear and settings, but more specifically, training your eye to see things through the lens, how composition works, and how light interacts with texture and subject matter. For instance, here's a great way to demonstrate exactly how lens focal lengths affect the way composition is affected. Instead of focal lengths, we get this number which represents the field of view of the camera. The lower the number, the more telephoto or long the lens is. As we increase the number, we get closer to a more standard field of view. Notice how we have to move closer to our subject matter to refill the frame as we go wider in focal length, just like in real life. When we use a higher number, this represents a more wide-angle lens. And when we go with the highest number, we get an extreme wide-angle view, almost a fisheye look. I think it looks really dynamic, almost like a GoPro. It gives you this raw, visceral point of view. On the other extreme end of the spectrum, you can use a really long focal length instead for a more compressed background. It's similar to how motorsport photographers shoot with their long lenses on the racetrack. Here I agitate the balance of the bike intentionally to make it look more interesting, simulating an extreme corner. I like to keep a bit of background blur in this just to make the telephoto look more authentic. You can see here again the difference between shooting wide and shooting long, and the difference that it makes in the framing of the bike. I personally boost the highlights because I feel it helps simulate the limited dynamic range of real-world cameras. And I add a little chromatic aberration in the corners because, well, everyone likes that retro feel these days. You can choose between using the first-person perspective camera or by using a drone. The drone basically simulates the camera rotating around you as its center axis, and it comes with more camera control and features than the first-person perspective. Unless there is a strong reason not to, I tend to maximize depth of field because I find the game doesn't simulate bokeh very well. It reminds me of the earlier iteration of iPhone portrait modes where it poorly simulates depth of field using software. Here's a cool trick I found from Reddit user Wafflemaker using grenades to create explosion practical effects in camera. I absolutely love how you can preview the lighting of the metal textures live in this game. It's exactly what us photographers think about when we're shooting cars. Notice how the lighting on the bike responds with the changing position and distance of the muzzle fire. Another trick you can do is to hold the accelerate, brake and turning keys at the same time, which simulates a burnout. Unfortunately, the smoke textures aren't that great. In reality, you would add a lot more depth and volumetric lighting. And just like in the real world, people get in the way of the shot. Just about the only thing they could do to make it more realistic is to have security guards come and kick you out halfway through your shoot. There's also nothing there stopping you from tweaking the shots further in Photoshop, just to give it a little bit more post-processing polish. By turning on the Muzzle Flash, you get an excellent way to preview lighting live on a model. Personally, I like to bump the highlights a little in the photo menu, then slightly reduce the exposure and add a little chromatic aberration and grain. I personally like the first-person perspective when it comes to shooting portraits. There is clearly more work put towards these cutscenes, and the motion-captured actors make the interactions feel more authentic on camera. This game in its photo mode is quite simply great for photography. It's a chance for both experienced and less experienced photographers alike to do things they have always wanted to do in real life, without the logistical hurdles that get in the way of doing things in the real world. Many emerging photographers are limited by lack of opportunity and equipment, and this is a chance for them to learn how composition and lighting works without hitting the barrier of lenses and equipment. You just have to have a $2,000 rig at the stage to run it. And sure, it's never going to substitute reality completely. Most of the time the images just don't work. It's too polygonal, low in texture, or the people can just look too artificial and doll-like. But I still think it's real and beautiful enough to be both rewarding and educational, if you're willing to invest the time and effort absorbing this beautiful virtual landscape. I remember playing The Witcher 3 and sinking so many hours into Gwent, but in Cyberpunk my side hustle is all about photography, and unlike in Gwent, I actually feel like I kinda know what I'm doing. In the world of 2020 and lockdowns, this game could not have come at a better time for those of us who are itching to be shooting again.